It's time for news from around the world, and meanwhile in. Meanwhile, in Jamaica, they've got a pretty interesting proposal. They're apparently preparing to request compensation from Britain over its role in the transatlantic slave trade back in the 17th and 18th centuries, when at least 600,000 Africans were shipped to the Caribbean as enslaved people. There are multiple people involved in this effort, but I want to focus first on Olivia Grange, Jamaica's Minister of Sports, Youth and Culture, who told Reuters that her government would seek reparatory justice in all forms to repair the damages that our ancestors experienced. And depending on where you look, different dollar values have been attributed to this, that they might be requesting 5 billion or 7 billion or 10 billion dollars. But why? Well, Olivia Grange says our African ancestors were forcibly removed from their home and suffered unparalleled atrocities in Africa to carry out forced labor to the benefit of the British Empire. And the most amazing thing, though, is one of the reasons that they say this is meritive, and it's historically grounded. You got to listen to this. The petition is connected to a motion filed by a Jamaican lawmaker, Mike Henry, to seek more than $10 billion, his estimate of how much enslavers received in compensation after Britain abolished slavery, freeing an estimated 800,000 enslaved black people back in 1834. Britain made those disbursements after taking out a mammoth loan, the interest on which it finished paying only in 2015, which is amazing, and I didn't know that. But they're asking for like, so you can give that money to the slaveholders, but not the people who were enslaved, or the government that's trying to represent them. So it's a pretty amazing idea, Vivian. I don't know necessarily that it will work, but what do you think about it?
I mean, they have every right, and they should. I mean, more blood has been spilled in Jamaica and in all of the Caribbean. It's absolutely horrible. Genocide. I mean, if you recall, Jamaica was where Columbus touched down in 1494, and when he started eradicating the Taino people, the Arawak people, and then the slave trade started shortly after that. And this is a country that has suffered so much and has generational trauma. Of course, they should have redress. Of course, they should be compensated for this. I don't think they will. I think it's a really great position to take, and I think it will maybe lead the charge for a lot of other Caribbean nations and a lot of other countries that suffered greatly. I mean, but really all of like North America, the Caribbean, South America, all of that, not to mention Europe and Africa. I mean, the slave trade was absolutely massive. So if this actually takes hold, we're gonna see a lot other people following suit.
Yeah. Which is one reason why I think that it probably won't, but it's a good argument, and it certainly at the very least starts a conversation. Want to give you a little bit more information. So they say enslaved people transported to the Caribbean were forced to work in dire conditions on sugar and crop plantations where deadly diseases were rife. As many as 20 million African men, women, and children were enslaved during this period. But it wasn't a racial thing, that's what I learned on Fox News. It was just, I mean, sure, it was bad or whatever, but it wasn't a racial thing that they were doing. And think about how much money would eventually be made over this period of time by Britain. The initial money that they made, all of the investment that was then put into, like they have benefited so much. They're only asking for $10 billion. Seems pretty reasonable when you put it in that historical context.
Even after the slave trade supposedly ended, slavery continued through indentured servitude and of course abuse. I mean, we see it all over the Caribbean, of course, even going into Cuba, which is the whole reason that the revolution began. And unfortunately started an oppressive regime, all those helping people come out of slavery and giving Afro Cubans and really, I mean, validating the African people. I mean, that's why Nelson Mandela met with Fidel as soon as he came out of jail, because there were few people fighting for Africans around the globe. And so I really applaud Jamaica, and I really hope that there is some respect given to this proposal.
Yeah, that's a great point. For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.